Welcome again to my studies in Bible exegesis. It's quite important to have a good background as to what the Bible is speaking about in a very general sort of way. And in Providence, I've tended to be looking at some of the big events with regard to Egypt and Assyria and Babylon. And I gave a quick summary of that in the last video. But I said I wanted to move on to deal with the Roman emperors that are probably of relevance to anyone wanting to know about Bible exegesis. But I did give a hint last time that I would deal with two people in between them, that is Alexander the Great and Hannibal. The simple way to try to remember these great movements is to think of the image in Daniel chapter 2, which you can look up, where the head of gold is the king of Babylon, and he is replaced by the Medo-Persian Empire, and then the Grecian Empire, and then the Roman Empire. So as a quick mnemonic, that helps you to remember these four dynasties. And the purpose of these videos is to try to get across some of these simple ways of remembering things, and that's one way to think of the big empires along those lines. Alexander the Great got that name because he was a very young man and conquered so much of the world, and when he died at 33, the story goes that he wept because there were no more countries for him to conquer, which of course was not true, but he did manage to put a stamp in a very big way across the Middle East, and indeed as a result of his father and then Alexander the Great putting Greece on the map, you got the Grecian Empire. That was followed by the Roman Empire, which we're going to try to reach, although we won't reach it with this video, I don't think. Alexander the Great is mentioned in the last chapters of the book of Daniel, not by name, but he is there. So we've mentioned Daniel chapter 2 if you go to the end. Now I did mention that Hannibal is also mentioned there. Now Hannibal is not mentioned by name, but he is there, and I thought some of you might be skeptical about that, so I thought I would just turn to my own commentary and read just this short entry from Daniel chapter 11 at verse 18, where the Bible says of a prince for his own behalf. My commentary says this is a friendly potentate, and probably Hannibal. After Hannibal's military successes against the Romans, which had earned him the title of the father of military strategy, the Roman general Scipio studied and copied his strategies and defeated Hannibal finally at the Battle of Zama near Carthage. And that's where Hannibal's people were based. I'll talk about Carthage in a minute. I'll just finish off what I've read here. That was in 202 BC, and from which Scipio earned the name Scipio Africanus and the nickname the Roman Hannibal. This was the decisive end of what was known as the Second Punic War, and it was Hannibal's only defeat. Hannibal left Carthage and he went to be the military advisor to the Seleucid king Antiochus III. And we read about him in Daniel chapter 11, over verses 13 to 19. And he went to help, Hannibal went to help him in his wars against Rome. And so Hannibal is probably this prince that is mentioned in chapter 11, verse 18. It's interesting to notice how you have all these critics who think that Bible prophecies are written after the event. This is a very common but unsubstantiated way of dealing with these things. But I won't take up time with regard to that. But he's mentioned here in the prophecy of Daniel. Now I mentioned Carthage. My videos, I want to put out factoids that might be helpful to you. It might take a long time for you to come across these things. So I'll just mention just very briefly that Carthage had very good shipping in the Mediterranean, and this is what kept them ahead of the Romans. And so, thinking of the ships going along the Mediterranean, the Phoenicians were to the north of Israel, right at the far east end of the Mediterranean, and they had tremendous shipping, and so they sailed right along the Mediterranean and out of the Mediterranean. But Carthage, which was on the north coast of Africa, further along the Mediterranean, just south of Italy, that was another great centre, and it was the breadbasket of Africa, and the Romans wanted to get hold of all that wheat that was coming from Africa, but Carthage had much better shipping than they did, and indeed not only did Scipio copy Hannibal's military tactics, but the Romans also copied their shipping so that they could get on top of things. And the Romans did a lot of that. I mean, they borrowed from the Grecian Empire, which was before them. If you remember Daniel's statue, you had the Grecian Empire and then the Roman Empire. They copied lots of things from the Greeks, and we've got here copying from Hannibal. Just a few other factoids that just it's very good for memory and for mnemonics to have a few things put together, which helps you to remember things. Hannibal was his family name was Barca, and he was actually in Spain, and it's thought that the name Barcelona actually comes from and derives from that. And for those of you, if I can look up my material here on that, I don't quite have it in the file in front of me, but just going by memory, the football stadium in Barcelona, I think, holds about 100,000 people, which is about the rough same size as Hannibal's army when he took his elephants over the Alps to attack the Romans. These are just some factoids to fit into your mnemonics. Another mnemonic that might be of interest is that Hannibal is the name of a small place in Missouri in the United States, and that's where Mark Twain was brought up. So these are just a few other things. So you've got here Alexander the Great, and you've got Hannibal mentioned there at the end of Daniel. But before we move on to the Romans, it's often said things like, the Roman Empire and the Greek Empire, and I think it's important that you get some big, broad pictures with regard to things. And it's often said that these were the greatest empires around, but what's not often remembered is that Genghis Khan was an even bigger military general, and he actually conquered an empire that was 4 times the size of Alexander the Great's empire, and twice as big as the Roman Empire. So it's just to give you this broad sweep of history and what is going on in the world. So that's sort of filling in the gap between what I was saying about Babylon and Assyria on the last occasion, and I was going to go on to the Roman emperors of note, but I thought, well, maybe we'll just fill in that little gap in between the two. Just some dates to think about. Again, this is mnemonics to try to help you to have a scaffold on which to pin some thoughts. Jesus, as we know, was born in 4 BC because of a miscalculation that was made with regard to his birth. But Archbishop Usher calculated the date of creation as 4004 BC. The point to notice there is the 4,000 years covering the period of the Old Testament. And maybe I'll deal with some of the timing of things so that you can get a feel. You may remember on the last occasion I gave you a mnemonic with regard to Babylon and Assyria. People know about the Great Battle of Carchemish in 605 BC, which is a date worth knowing, when Babylon got the hegemony of the part of the world. But another date that's, if you think of 605 and you think of 705 BC, 705 was when Assyria got the dominance over Babylon, and then 605 BC was when Babylon got dominance over Assyria, the other way around. So these are mnemonics. So you got 4,000 years of Old Testament history. So these are just some scaffolding points, and we'll move on if our Lord spares us in the next video from that point. So I hope that's been helpful, giving you some factoids, things to think about, and helps to open up your background knowledge with regard to things, which is helpful for biblical exegesis. So until the next time, God bless you and keep you.